Tonight, Canada is now world famous for suiciding the young, the old, the sick, and the poor. It's November 30th, and this is the Ezra Levant Show. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Have you checked out the Rebel News store lately? We're always adding new stuff, and just in time for Christmas, we've added some very fun trucker Christmas stuff. I cannot wait to get some for myself, but also for my family. And actually, I can get the shirt I want for myself for free, and so can you with our new coupon code. The coupon code is Christmas, and if you buy 2 unisex shirts, you get the third one for yourself for free. Just go to rebelnewsstore.com, coupon code Christmas, to buy 2 shirts and get your third one free.
Levant Show.
Shame on you, you censorious bug.
We have different beats here at Rebel News. I like to talk about the trucker convoy, the lockdowns, federal politics, freedom of speech, foreign affairs in the U.S. and China and elsewhere. Other reporters here cover other beats. Sheila Gunn-Reid, our chief reporter, covers Western issues, firearms, and she also covers life issues, as in governments snuffing out life. And unfortunately in Canada, that is happening a lot. Crazy stuff, like government doctors deciding they won't give a woman an organ transplant because she won't get jabbed, completely unrelated. So they're just sentencing her to death, really. Here's our reporter, Celine Gallas, asking Alberta Premier Danielle Smith about that.
Hi, Premier Smith. Celine Gallas here with Rebel News. You had previously announced to protect the vaccination status in the Alberta Human Rights Code. You've backed off that plan for this sitting, but lives are still on the line. Annette Lewis was denied a transplant because of her vaccination status, and she will die without it. Does your government have plans to address this medical coercion?
I am seeking a second opinion on that particular case, and I know that there is at least one other case as well. So as soon as I have a result from that, I will let you know. But on the general issue, I've been pretty clear that we do not want to see discrimination against anybody on the basis of their booster status or their vaccination status. And I'm hopeful that the business community and other entities operating in this province have heard that message loud and clear, and will make sure to bring their policies into alignment with that objective.
Do you have a timeline for this? Because I feel like it is a very time-sensitive matter.
The difficulty with transplant patients is that they do have a protocol they go through to determine who has the best likelihood of survivability. And so that's why I need to have a second medical opinion. I don't want to supersede that. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get an opinion in the matter of a number of weeks.
Imagine being a doctor, motto, do no harm, Hippocratic oath, and you're voting to essentially sentence someone to death by denying them life-saving treatment. You know, doctors can be angels, or they can be angels of death. That's the nickname they gave Dr. Joseph Mengele, the angel of death. He really was a doctor in Nazi Germany who really did atrocious medical experiments on concentration camp victims in Nazi Germany. So many doctors were actually involved. It wasn't just him. Afterwards, they had the doctor trials, as they were called, in the city of Nuremberg. That's where they came up with the phrase, the Nuremberg Code. It was part of the verdict. It was a list of principles to be followed so that never again would people be forced to take medical procedures against their wishes without prior informed consent and the ability to remove that consent. For nearly 80 years, that was the gold standard in medical ethics. The pandemic blew that away, and now we're here. Not just where doctors withhold medical care to kill someone. That's passive murder, I guess, but where they proactively actually kill someone. It's not even suicide, is it? That's homicide. Of course, they give it a prettier name. MAID, M-A-I-D, medical assistance in dying. No, sorry, that's homicide. Anyways, that's the beat of a few of our reporters here, including Sheila Gunn-Reid. In fact, she's running a petition against it right now. Lots of signatures. Here's an excerpt from her video on this medical assistance in suicide.
Physician-assisted suicide has received a rebrand. To shirk the stigma, it's now called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. It seems a little less sinister when you put it that way, less like doctor-induced homicide and more like just a helping hand. But it might be more accurate in some respects, since it's easier than ever to take your own life with the help of the publicly funded, completely rationed Canadian healthcare system. A nurse or a pharmacist can help a patient and their life now. If you agree with me that Canadians need proper care, not prompt dispatching at the hands of some overly eager medical professional, please visit helpnothomicide.com and sign the petition. Now, medical homicide in Canada is happening for all manner of reasons, and not just because someone is facing imminent death due to a painful terminal illness. A 51-year-old woman in Ontario with severe sensitivities to chemicals took her own life with the help of the medical system because she couldn't get better housing. In Toronto, a 90-year-old woman chose a medically assisted way out because she couldn't face any more time in government-caused COVID lockdowns in her retirement facility. A 66-year-old Montreal man chose medically assisted death because he couldn't quickly access home care that he needed to deal with his other medical needs. A 54-year-old Vancouver woman plagued with debts because of her chronic medical conditions told Chatelaine that a medically assisted death might be her only option. This young woman wants to choose medical assistance in death due to chronic illness, diabetes, and bulimia. She wants to leave behind a fiancé and her young son. And then, a Veterans Affairs caseworker allegedly admitted to helping Canadian veterans end their lives.
Well, I've heard about the story a bit in the media. It's not ignored completely, but it's not being given the attention I think it deserves. More people will be killed this year by doctors on purpose through MAID than will die from COVID-19 in Canada. That's a fact. You'd think it would be bigger news. Well, it is news, sort of. A fashion company called Simons thinks this is an important issue, as in they support it, they love it. They think suicide is important to promote, to glamorize suicide. I'm not sure how that sells women's clothing, but Simons has produced a fancy TV ad to promote suicide, not to oppose suicide, not to support Mental Health Week, not to support the Kids Help Phone or Suicide Crisis Hotline. The opposite. Simons has engaged an ad agency to make a beautiful ad promoting suicide as a beautiful exit. They are literally pro-death. Here's their CEO, or chief merchant, as he calls himself, merchant of death. I'm not sure if he thinks he can sell more clothes by being the pro-homicide fashion designer out there. Not sure how that works. But listen to this self-righteous murderer condoner. He's bragging about how brave he is. He's brave for telling women to kill themselves. Take a look.
Some new roles that I've taken on recently have let me to be much more involved in the creative teams at Simons. It's been really an honor and a pleasure and a challenge. And it's allowed me to be involved in a new project that has really pushed us to our limits. And I felt the need to talk to you about it today, to explain why we did this project, because it is very different from what we've done in the past. Where does this story begin? I guess it begins 6 months ago after I met a young woman called Jennifer, who, despite being at the end of her life due to an illness, really wanted to tell her story. And she was courageous, she was beautiful, she was intelligent and thoughtful. She was inspiring. We decided to try to tell her story and to, as Jennifer would say to me, maybe create a little ripple out there, a ripple of generosity, a ripple that might allow people to see beauty obviously in the nice moments, but more importantly, to have the strength and the courage to see beauty in the more difficult moments in life. And that's what we've tried to do, is with generosity, tell Jennifer's story. And it's not a story about the end of Jennifer's life. It's a celebration of Jennifer's life. She dedicated herself to helping others. Despite a lot of difficult circumstances, I think she rose above them with resilience. And I believe that she had the courage to see beauty everywhere and to live in the moment. And perhaps if her story can lead others to see that hope, optimism, and ultimately come to generosity. That's an important message for all of us. If we make the effort to see the hard beauty, not only the easy beauty, it reminds us, it shows us a path toward that hope and optimism and generosity and connection between us. It reminds us how to be more, how to give more, how to feel more, how to be more connected to one another. How is this different from what we've done before? It's obviously not a commercial campaign. It's more an effort to use our freedom, our voice, and the privilege we have to speak and create every day here in a way that is more about human connection. And I think we sincerely believe that companies have a responsibility to participate in communities and to help build the communities that we want to live in tomorrow and leave to our children. And this is one little gesture. I admit I'm scared, but I would say I think without perhaps courage, I say that with humility, there is no creativity and there is no possibility of making beauty. So if people could follow us down that road, I just ask that they look deeper and celebrate Jennifer's life and the choices she made and make that effort, and perhaps they'll see some of the beauty that I saw in Jennifer and how she chose to live her life and the final days of her life.
Now, the ad itself never comes right out and says that she was killed by doctors. It's ambiguous. They say she was terminally ill. So maybe he's not quite that brave, but he sure is proud of himself. Here's the ad making suicide glamorous.
Dying in a hospital is not what's natural. That's not what's soft. In these kind of moments, you need softness. It can take dying to figure out what living is actually like. I spent my life filling my heart with beauty, with nature, with connection. So I choose to fill my final moments with the same. Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see music. I see the ocean. I see cheesecake. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, with all the pain, and in these final moments, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it. And seeing the rhythms of what's gonna keep going after I'm gone bring a lot of comfort.
That's satanic, isn't it? So naturally, Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster loves it. Just euphoric about the normalization and the commercialization of euthanasia. Here's a story they wrote, 1,500 words of pro-euthanasia propaganda without a single voice of concern or criticism or a disabled advocate, just gushing over murder. In fact, the reality of government-sponsored homicide is not just unglamorous compared to that sexy ad. It's deeply troubling. In Canada, military veterans are now routinely being counseled to commit suicide. It's not a one-off, it's a policy. A half dozen such cases, at least, that we know of. Veterans with PTSD, well, they cost a lot, you see. And Trudeau just doesn't have money to take care of them. He has enough money to fight them in court or to kill them, but not to help them.
I was prepared to be injured in the line of duty when I joined the military. Nobody forced me to join the military. I was prepared to be killed in action. What I wasn't prepared for, Mr. Prime Minister, is Canada turning its back on me. So which veteran was it that you were talking about?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion and your strength and being here today to share this justifiable frustration and anger with me and with all of us here. Thank you for having the courage to stand here, and thank you for listening to my answer. On a couple of elements you brought up. First of all, why are we still fighting against certain veterans groups in court? Because they are asking for more than we are able to give right now. They are asking for more than we... Well, no, hang on. You're asking for honest answers.
It's not just veterans, it's people who are in pain or people who are depressed or just people having a rough go of it. Sometimes it's just people who are poor. Imagine thinking it's better to kill yourself than to be poor. I guess you could think it, but imagine a government that would say, yes, we agree, kill yourself. There's no hope for you. Look at this. Canadian man facing eviction accepted for country's legal euthanasia. That's a story in the Daily Mail. He's a Canadian who was counseled to kill himself because he was depressed about being poor. Now, public reaction to his news story changed his mind. That story got more press overseas than it did here at home in Canada. Canada will soon allow medically assisted dying for mental illness. Has there been enough time to get it right? The Globe Mail says you can get it right. Mental illness, even eating disorders, are now considered grounds for someone to kill themselves. Here's another document. This is incredible. This is now how it is in Canada. It's coming to the U.S. soon, too, I'm sure. This is incredible. Biden's senior advisor, Ezekiel Emanuel, who's a brother of Rahm Emanuel, Obama's former chief of staff, he has argued that suicide is good because it saves the government money. Well, that's what happens when the government's in charge. They care about money more than your life. Jonathan Swift, the great satirist, hundreds of years ago wrote something called a modest proposal. That was a joke in itself. It wasn't a modest proposal. It was an outrageous proposal. He proposed to eat the poor. It was a horrendous, dark joke, meant as a social commentary. It's now not a joke anymore. It's a scheme. It's a plot, isn't it? And look at this from the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons. That's the regulator for doctors, telling doctors who commit assisted suicide not only that it's a good thing to do, but they must not write suicide on the death certificate, but rather to claim that the underlying disease killed these patients instead of the suicide. Let me read to you paragraph 11. When completing the medical certificate of death, physicians, A, must list the illness, disease, or disability leading to the request for made as the cause of death, and B, must not make any reference to medical assistance in dying or the medications administered on the certificate. But that's a lie. The disease leading to the request for suicide, I'm poor, I'm depressed, I'm in pain, that didn't kill them. The doctor did. And the doctors are being told to lie about it. That's Canada. It's normal here now. It's still shocking around the world. Can I show you two videos that our friend Sheila did just last night in the U.S. alone? Here she is on Newsmax.
Sheila Gunn-Reid is the editor-in-chief of Rebel News in Canada, and she joins us now. Sheila, it's good to have you on. Let's talk about the ad for a second. It really shows how dark the left has become. I mean, they're trying to almost make it sexy to kill yourself.
You know, what you're seeing here is the corporate manifestation of the completely entrenched culture of death that we see before us here in Canada. You know, as Canadians, the idea that a clothing company would do an advertisement for medical assistance in dying, frankly, it doesn't shock us. Because we live in a society where Justin Trudeau's government has, as you pointed out in your intro, made it very easy to just end your time on this earth. They've removed the 10-day wait time from when you ask for medical assistance in dying and when you receive it. So your worst day could be your last day. And when I say medical assistance in dying, that doesn't mean that this is going to be administered by a doctor that knows you. It can be done by a nurse or a medical professional, which may mean a pharmacist. And so what you're seeing here, this corporation that is promoting this is all part and parcel of the rewrite of our society here at the hands of Justin Trudeau.
That's great. And a few hours later, Sheila was invited on Fox News. Take a look at this.
Sheila Gunn-Reid, editor-in-chief of Rebel News. She's running a national campaign to force the government to end this practice. Sheila, it seems to me that they're selling assisted suicide with a, very sophisticated, fun, kind of adventurous message. What the heck is going on up north?
Laura, I just want to thank you so much for your interest in this. Unlike the corporate media here in Canada that's been tainted by Justin Trudeau's bailouts, at Rebel News, we're one of the few independent outlets that can still speak about these issues freely, but also with the sense of horror the issue rightly deserves. We see companies do this all the time. We see them align themselves with government on issues like climate change and BLM and reproductive issues. They go woke. This is what it means to be woke in Canada now. So why wouldn't corporations align themselves with this next anti-human, anti-life thing? I just want to point out to you how extreme Canada is on this issue. Justin Trudeau's government has removed the 10-day wait time from when you ask for medical assistance in suicide and when you receive it. And you don't have to do it in writing. You can just verbally ask the state to kill you. To put this all into context, we had about 16,000 deaths in Canada related to COVID. Depends on how you count that, of COVID or with COVID, but it was 16,000 deaths. We know that there were 10,000 requests in writing for medically assisted suicide, and that doesn't take into account the deaths that occurred because somebody just verbally asked for it and received it on the very day that they asked for it. And when we say medical assistance in suicide, don't think for a second that that means a doctor's participating in this. It doesn't have to be your doctor. It can just be a medical professional. That might be a nurse that is seeing you today for the first time, or even a pharmacist that's helping you take a short trip off a long, or take a short trip off the earth. That's the state of affairs here in Canada.
Brits and Americans care about our homicide doctors. Why don't Canadians? Stay with us for more. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Are you tired of walking around for hours this time of year looking for the perfect Christmas gift for your loved ones? Well, have no fear. Rebel News Christmas merch is here. When it comes to putting a smile on the face of the patriots in your life this Christmas, our Rebel News store has everything you'll need. Just like that lady singing in church for Thanksgiving.
I got beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, lamb, ram, pork, dog, beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, chicken, turkeys, rat.
We've got Christmas tees, Christmas hoodies, Christmas beanies. My personal favorite is the All I Want for Christmas is a New Prime Minister top. Can I get an amen in the back? But we also have the Rebel favorites that you can wear all year long, like our classic Is It Trudeau or Castro tee, or this new one that says free speech is a must. But warning in advance, the leftist Kevins and Karens of the world will be triggered.
United States, President Obama.
Now, if you head to rebelnewsstore.com right now, you can save. If you buy 2 unisex t-shirts, you get your third one free. All you have to do is use the coupon code Christmas and you're in business. And remember, everything that you buy at the rebelnewsstore.com not only blesses the loved ones you bought it for, it also helps support our independent journalism so we can keep on bringing you the other side of the story. Merry Christmas.
Well, our eyes here at Rebel World headquarters have been focused on the Trucker Commission in Ottawa. I think that's a very important story. It's an echo of even more important story, the trucker convoy itself. And yesterday, I have to say, I was riveted on the popular uprising in China that seems to be getting even bigger and bolder. Just incredible. Other things catch our eye, including Elon Musk taking over Twitter. Is that an American story or a world story? I think it's a story of the theme that we care about, freedom of speech. That said, we are Canadian, and I myself was born in the great province of Alberta, and I still, even though I'm here in exile in Toronto, regard myself as a spiritual Albertan, if nothing less. I think it is one of the most important provinces, and it's been called many times a laboratory for political ideas. From Ralph Klein, of course, to, well, I put it to you, the new Premier Danielle Smith, who recently took her seat in the legislature, having won a by-election. She outlined her agenda yesterday in a press conference. I'd like to show you a clip of that, and then to walk us through the meaning of it, not just to Alberta, but to the rest of the country too, our friend Lauren Gunter, the senior columnist of the Edmonton Sun. But first, here's a couple of minutes of Premier Danielle Smith.
We need the power to reset the relationship with Ottawa. That's what this is all about. We've tried different things in the past and it hasn't worked. So we've got to try something new. And I must tell you, I believe it's already working. And the proof of that is the most recent COP27 final resolution that came forward. And if you look at Minister Stephen Guilbeault's comments about why he did not support that, he said it's because in Canada, natural resources are provincial jurisdiction. And if he signed on to a resolution to phase out oil and natural gas, he would face a legal challenge from the provinces that Ottawa would not win. Now, this is not language I've ever heard out of Stephen Guilbeault, but I think it goes to the work that our Environment Minister, Sonia Savage, has done in helping to educate Ottawa that we are not a subordinate level of government, that we want...
You need this power. Like, what is so urgent that you would use what is normally an emergency power to skip around the legislature to put
because we've been ignored.
Point on?
We've been ignored for 10 years. The former Premier, Rachel Notley, tried the Climate Leadership Plan to get a better relationship with Ottawa. It failed. Former Premier Jason Kenney tried to have a collaborative relationship with Stephen Guilbeault in Quebec to get LNG export. It failed. We put forward an equalization referendum to try to start a conversation to change the relationship with Ottawa. It failed. So now we're going to try something new. I think we've got their attention. We've got their attention because I know with the relationship that we're now seeing develop with the federal government, finally recognizing that they cannot pass carte blanche power over our natural resources, that they have recognized our industrial pricing program around industrial emissions for CO2, that they have accepted that natural resources fall within our jurisdiction. I think that that begins a constructive relationship, and that's what this was all about. You do not have that relationship change without a push. This was a push. And here's the point. I hope we never have to use this bill. I hope that we've sent a message to Ottawa that we will vigorously defend our constitutional areas of jurisdiction, and they should just butt out. They should work collaboratively with us on areas where we have common cause. And I'm hoping that we're beginning to see a change in that relationship. That's the reason you put forward a piece of legislation like this. It's the reason why Scott Moe put forward a similar piece of legislation, which incidentally, the NDP in Saskatchewan are supporting, because they are also realizing that you've got to put Saskatchewan first. We are putting Alberta first, and I would invite the NDP to join us in supporting this bill.
Well, isn't that interesting? I have to say, if that speech was spoken en français, it would be completely unremarkable, because that generally has been the point of view of every premier of Quebec, whether they're the Parti Québécois, the Liberals, or the new CAQ party. Standing up for Quebec jurisdiction and staring down at Ottawa is actually common currency amongst all the provinces. You'll notice that the placard on her podium said "Standing Up for Alberta. And I think one of the knocks on Jason Kenney over the last few years was not just his heavy-handed approach to the lockdowns, but rather his failure to stand up sufficiently vigorously to Ottawa. At least that's my take, but some would say I've gone all Toronto-ish, having been out here for a while. So let's go to our man who can give us the proper understanding of Edmonton. He's our Sherpa out there. I'm talking about our friend Lauren Gunter, senior columnist of the Edmonton Sun. Great to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you. You're still Albertan at the core. I can sense that. So
well, thank you for the compliment. I mean, Alberta's an interesting place, and like Quebec, I think like Newfoundland, like BC, it always profits a premier to fight against Ottawa, and not just for sizzle reasons. There is some substance to it too. Danielle Smith pointed out that maybe the feds blinked at saying we're going to phase out oil and gas because they know they're going to have a tougher time with Danielle Smith as premier. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that either, but I am surprised that Guilbeault said that at COP27 in Egypt because the feds have not cared. That's one of the reasons why I like this act. I think there's a lot in it that is redundant, that there's already the existing powers under the Constitution for the provincial government to do a lot of the things laid out in the Sovereignty Act. I think a lot of it is going to be end up being a dead end. For instance, one of the things that the provincial government wants to do with this act is put the onus on the feds to show that a law they pass is constitutional, rather than Alberta having to go to court, sometimes with other provinces, to see whether the courts will uphold the federal law as constitutional. I think in the end, the feds are the feds, and they appoint all the judges above the provincial level anyway. And in every province, all the federal judges appointed by Ottawa. You're unlikely to get many courts that will rule federal legislation is unconstitutional. But it does happen every once in a while. And I think it's good for the province to say, look, until you can come back to us and have a court order that says this is constitutional, we're not abiding by this law. Will it buy us much time? Probably not. Will it get us new results? Maybe. And I think that's what's useful to me in this law, is that maybe they'll give Ottawa indigestion or a headache or a rash that the feds have to deal with by giving us a little salve now and then. And so, yes, is this the be-all and end-all? No. But after having been battered by the feds for 40 years, and especially since 2015 when the Trudeau Liberals took over, it's a welcome relief to see the provincial government putting this kind of pressure. I'll give you an example of why I think it's unnecessary, but why I don't mind that. Before this bill came in, the feds had announced that they were going to ban handguns in Canada. And Tyler Shandro, who is the Justice Minister in Alberta, said, fine, we think that's wrong. We think it's ridiculous. We don't think it's going to achieve anything in bringing down crime in Canada because criminals already don't obey laws about gun restrictions. But if you're going to do this, understand, the RCMP is the local police force in all but a few of the major cities in Alberta. And we, the province of Alberta, pay for them to be the police. We are not going to authorize a single cent of our payment to go towards confiscating handguns because we don't like this law. Well, you didn't need the Sovereignty Act to do that. They did it before they had the Sovereignty Act. But the Sovereignty Act gets them in the mindset that they're going to do things like that more often. They're going to be more like Quebec, where Quebec just looks for ways to avoid federal legislation. And so I in general, I like the approach of this law.
You know, Listening to you describe it, you've made me look at the law in a new way. It's called the Sovereignty Act, and the bones of it were finally revealed. It was interesting that she campaigned for leader of the party without showing the act. She just had the idea of the act. I thought that was a little bit audacious, but it made some sense. You want to draft that with legislative experts. You want to draft that with your justice minister. There was some sense to it. I might call it, listening to the way you describe it, reversing the onus. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
Ottawa has to prove it's kosher. Alberta doesn't have to prove it's not. And at the end of the day, a court will resolve it, but Alberta won't be on the back foot right out of the gates.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It changes the presumption.
There's one thing in it that I detest, and that is there's a unilateral power for the cabinet to decree changes to Alberta laws. Now, this has become the big part of the news story out here, is that they're trying to give themselves this decree power. And so much so that today, the Premier and Mr. Shandro, the Justice Minister, issued a joint press release explaining, no, it's not a big new power. It really isn't. The provincial cabinet would not change provincial law until there'd been a resolution in the legislature authorizing them to make such a change after it had been debated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My question with that is, so what's the point?
Yeah.
If you've got the legislature there already, rather than saying that the cabinet can decree things after the resolution has been passed in the legislature, get the MLAs to pass an amendment. This, you will remember, 2011, 2012, that Ed Stelmach, the then Tory Premier of Alberta, was having trouble getting power lines built across private property. And so his government passed a trio of bills that essentially suspended property rights whenever the cabinet decreed that it wanted a corridor to go across someone's private property. And that almost got Danielle elected as the Wild Rose Premier. It certainly won Wild Rose almost all the rural seats in the province. And this reminds me of that. And I don't understand how Smith, who campaigned against that in 2011 and 2012, doesn't see that. And especially since they keep saying, well, we're not going to use this power.
We'll never trust a politician. Exactly. And we've just spent 2.5 years living under a form of decree. All those health orders, none of those were voted on, let alone debated on in legislatures. Those were essentially done by decree. In fact, not even by cabinet. They were often by some unelected, unaccountable health boss.
I mean, all of those decrees were made under existing provincial legislation that's very explicit about how those can be done. But nonetheless, if one of your other, so her big issue during the leadership race was the Sovereignty Act. Her next big one was there wasn't going to be any more emergency mandates and powers for the provincial government under pandemics. Well, this seems to me to smack of some of those emergency powers, and I don't like it.
Yeah, me neither. I don't like any kind of decree. I thought, Danielle Smith, I've known her since we were at the University of Calgary. At the same time, I was the head of the Young Reform Party, if you can believe it, and she was the head of the Young Conservatives. It was funny. So she has been politically active since she was in school, and she's been in media. She's been a politician. She's smooth. It's funny to compare her to other politicians. Like she's a good talker. She's like, if you're in talk radio for years, you practiced at it. You have a tone, you have a lilt. And the way she rattled off Notley failed to try and then Kenny failed and the referendum, it made her, I thought it was very reasonable stuff. I think she can be very persuasive. I saw there was a journalist that was heckling her. I didn't watch the whole press conference, but I saw there was some heckling going on. I wonder how that's being received, because I think there's a real media party. There's a real pack in the press led by the CBC that do not like Danielle Smith, regard her as a radical, and want her to fail. I wonder who's winning that tug of war. I think she looks good and sounds good on her own. I don't know how well we just showed the raw footage there. Put that through the CBC filter. I'm not sure how well she's doing. How is she doing? How is Danielle Smith doing once it comes out of the sausage making machine of the media party?
It's hard to tell because she started from such a deficit. She was not popular. Lots of people didn't hear what she was saying directly. And I think she changed her message on the Sovereignty Act from the beginning of the UCP leadership race until the day she was selected back in early October. And she modified it, and she took people's criticisms into account and kind of amended her idea or proposal to make it more reasonable. When it initially came out, it was clearly unconstitutional. Wouldn't have survived the first challenge that the feds threw at it. Now I think she has a case where it's going to be a whole lot harder. It's going to be a bitter pill for the feds to swallow. And the point she made sort of secondhand in that little clip you showed is that we just want to make it so difficult for the feds to get their way that they think twice before they impose stuff on. It's like I want to give you two very good examples of how Alberta gets hard done by the federal government. And, people say, oh, you're from Alberta. You guys are all rich. You got all the oil. What are you complaining about? Mm-hmm. You'll remember before the 2019 federal election, the Liberal government brought in a ban on tanker traffic off the West Coast.
But only off the West Coast, not off the East Coast.
And if you looked at the wording of the bill, the only oil to which it applied was Alberta oil. So if they had found a lot of oil in northern British Columbia, they might have been able to sneak it out on tankers. Certainly that was a legal interpretation that was possible. So that's number one. And the other one is they put a cap. They brought in their green plan about 6 months ago, and it has emission targets for all different industry sectors. The emission reduction from oil and gas is 42% that they expect by their deadline in 2030. The emission reduction from the auto sector, which is big in Ontario and Quebec, 20%. Mm-hmm. So that's how come Alberta's unhappy. Yeah. That's how come a Sovereignty Act is needed. Yeah. And so, yes, are there flaws to this? Do I think it's going to make magic changes? No, I think there are flaws. I don't think it's going to make magic changes. But I just like the fact that we're hitting back full force now.
Yeah. Hey, let me tell you a story from 20 years ago when I briefly ran. You just made me think of it. When I briefly ran for Parliament myself in Calgary Southwest, and then I stepped aside quite reluctantly for Stephen Harper to run in that by-election. And I remember the first meeting that Harper had with our little board of directors, and I was sulking, and there was a transition from my candidacy to his. And you might recall that during the time that this happened, the federal party, it used to be called the Reform Party, then it was the Canadian Alliance, then it became and there was a civil war in it. Stockwell Day had just been deposed as leader. That's why Harper needed the entry into Parliament. He had just been reelected. So you had splittist groups. You had the Democratic Republic, I forget what it was called. Yeah, it was Deborah Gray and Monty Solberg and Chuck. So you had all these backstabby stuff. And someone said, Stephen Harper, how are you going to avoid being backstabbed the same way Stockwell Day was? And his answer, I don't have it verbatim, but I remember what he said. He said, if I move fast enough and am successful enough, they won't stab me in the back. The metaphor was, well, I'll move faster than the backstabs. I'll be successful enough. They won't want to stab me in the back. I'm not nailing it, but his answer was basically, because I'm going to be a winner. I'm going to succeed.
Yeah, exactly.
And nothing succeeds like success. I sort of mangled that anecdote, Lauren, forgive me. But it was a great question because the party was in a mess. Stephen Harper was leader precisely because there had been a civil war. And that's my analogy here. Yep. Jason Kenney was turfed in a kind of civil war. Danielle Smith won the leadership, but not by a huge margin. If I recall, it was like 54-46 over her rival. So the party is still sort of split. The caucus are the hand-picked MLAs who ran for Kenney. The cabinet is much of the same. So I would like to think that she is thinking, how could I avoid the backstabbing that undid Kenney? And and so here's my question to you. Is she moving fast enough? Is she moving forward enough? Is she being successful enough that would-be underminers say, you know what? I don't like her, and I had my favorite guy lose to her, but damn it, if she ain't doing a good job, And I think
No,
we might just win. Is she
another-
moving fast enough, like Harper said, that people are putting away their knives?
Yes, I think that's exactly what's happened. Another thing you have to remember is that she had the least caucus support of any of the major candidates. So she does not come to this with a group with inside caucus, a sizable group inside caucus who supported her. So she does have to move fast enough and be delicate enough that that there aren't factions that grow up against her. But you know, the most hopeful thing I've seen from the UCP since the leadership race ended in early October is that I think they truly understand that they can keep power so long as they don't split.
Yeah.
The only reason the NDP won in 2015 was because there was the PC party and the Wild Rose, and they split the party down, they split the right of center vote down the middle, and that allowed the NDP to win with 41% of the vote. And that can happen again. And so I think they're giving Smith an awful lot of leeway. I do think she has been far more receptive to voices from the caucus than Kenney was. I think near the end of the pandemic that there was this incredible strain in the caucus that even people who were basically Kenney supporters were tired of the tension because he was trying to solve it all and got his back up against an awful lot of the people who wouldn't move fast enough. Even if they didn't disagree with him, they just didn't suck it up and go along with him without question. So I think she's been more respectful of other voices and a little easier to work with.
Yeah. I remember at her annual general meeting about a month ago, she said that she had a one-on-one meeting with every single MLA for about an hour, if I recall what she said. I mean, that's a lot of time meeting with people who
60 plus hours.
And I would hazard the statement that some of those MLAs in that single meeting spent more time with her than they did with Jason Kenney one-on-one over his entire term.
I don't doubt that for a second. And I say all of this about Kenney, having been his friend since the early 90s. I mean, we personally know each other quite well. And I think something you said earlier was absolutely right, that he wasn't tough enough in public with Ottawa. I mean, certain things came out during the Rollo Commission in Ottawa into the Emergencies Act and the Freedom Convoy, where he was quite harsh with his federal counterparts about them not helping Alberta and being too draconian with their COVID laws and things. Had he been saying some of that stuff in public, he might still be the premier. I don't know. But the point is, he wasn't. And she is. And they're relieved. And a lot of their constituents, I'm sure their constituents are phoning them up and saying, thank goodness somebody's finally saying these things to Ottawa.
You know, that's a great point. If Kenney was secretly slamming Ottawa, but publicly refused to do so, in my mind, because he was didn't want to sully his public reputation for a future run as prime minister. He didn't want to seem too provincial. That's my theory. Hey, last question. Jason Kenney just put out a press release saying that he is resigning effective immediately. And there was some somewhat ambiguous language there about his reason, but I think it's wise for him to move on. I don't think he should stick around. He's still pretty young. He's only in his early 50s. Yep. I'm not asking for any personal information you may have privately, but what do you think he's going to do next? I mean, I think that he is so divided, Alberta, that I just don't know if he has a public role in that province. Frankly, I think he always preferred Toronto, and frankly, he preferred glamorous cities around the world, whether it was New York, Washington, or London. Where do you think Jason Kenney's going to wind up?
Well, you take a look at what Stephen Harper has done since he ceased being prime minister, and that is he's developed a very successful international government-to-government consultancy, or business-to-government consultancy, too. So if you have a business and you need to make some contacts with the governments in other countries, he had very good relations with an awful lot of senior people in a number of countries, despite what Trudeau said when he came in, that Canada's back and we're no longer the shame of the world, blah, 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 blah. Harper had really good relations with a lot of
India, Israel. I mean,
absolutely,
he's still friends with them.
The EU.
But that's Harper. But Kenney, I mean,
but Kenney was Kenny was immigration, he was defense, he was a lot of things in Ottawa, and he was very, very good at bringing oil companies back to Alberta while he was premier. And I think that there's an awful lot of business potential there. I think he's going to get appointed to board of directors. I think he's going to perhaps start his own consulting, but I have absolutely no idea. Haven't talked to him since he ceased to be the leader, much less since he ceased to be an MLA. And so I really have no clue.
Yeah, no, I was just asking for your hunch on things.
Yeah.
Well, listen, great to catch up with you. Thanks for taking us through things in Alberta. Very interesting. And of course, the election is coming up in the spring. We'll see what Albertans say. Thanks, my friend.
You bet.
All right, there you have it. Lauren Gunter, senior columnist for the Edmonton Sun. Stay with us. Your letters to me next. This free episode of the Ezra Levant Show is brought to you by...
Have you checked out the Rebel News store lately? We're always adding new stuff. And just in time for Christmas, we've added some very fun trucker Christmas stuff. I cannot wait to get some for myself, but also for my family. And actually, I can get the shirt I want for myself for free. And so can you with our new coupon code. The coupon code is Christmas. And if you buy 2 unisex shirts, you get the third one for yourself for free. Just go to rebelnewsstore.com, coupon code Christmas to buy 2 shirts and get your third one free.
Hey, welcome back. Your letters to me. Ese Chorlito says the Chinese citizens are protesting Xi when they should be revolting against the Chinese Communist Party entirely. I think they're protesting against both. Uncle Fester says this will encourage other countries' peoples to do the same, ushering in even worse clampdowns for our safety. Trudy's drooling with anticipation. Yeah, it's really funny because he's trying to be on the side of the uprising, but of course he's already said he admires the basic dictatorship there. And when people rose up peacefully in Canada against COVID lockdowns, he crushed them with tanks. Well, not tanks, but armed police and ride horses. They only talked about the tanks. Skoman 105 says, first, no amount of money will solve the, quote, problem of the planet changing. Nature isn't subject to our whims nor buyout power. As for the cash, well, Trudeau had to find another way to steal $912 million he got caught with the last time. I don't know what $912 million you're talking about, but Trudeau loves giving our money away to foreign countries. He won't give it to veterans, and he certainly won't give it to poor Canadians. He extracts more taxes from them every year, but he loves being the big shot with our money abroad. That's our show for today. Didn't Sheila do a great job on US TV last night? Until tomorrow, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.